Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay
This
Moore.
is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
This is Patrick Richardson, and you're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, indeed. Yes, you are. Hey, Patrick's a buddy of mine. Long time investigative reporter. He breaks national news fairly regularly. And yeah, just sometimes it's fun to have my friends on. I'm looking at the wrong camera because my damn camera equipment won't work right today. I don't know why. But sometimes it's fun just to have your friends on and talk about stuff. You know, I've got this degree in mass comm going way back, and I've learned about journalism. And look, Patrick, you know, we were taught an ethos, right? You were supposed to focus on the interrogatives, tell the story, limit the adjectives, certainly barely any adverbs at all if you could avoid it. And because we were there to do one thing, that was say, this is what happened. Now, like, I saw this story about this, the coverage of the Rittenhouse trial. And this is a trial that everybody agrees is going poorly, right?
Yeah. And then it's still being spun as these are victims. One of these victims drew down first on Rittenhouse. That's admitted to it in court. The prosecutor goes, ugh. And they had like this live coverage from like this one channel that I was watching where they like comment live on the thing. And they're like, you know, directed verdict right now, like case is over, right? And yet somehow some of the media comes back, and this is news. This is not opinion. This is news. Comes back and they say something other than what is actually going on in this court case. Yeah, and it happens all the time. You know, I spent, as you said, a long time, almost 30 years in the community news business, and doing some freelance stuff on the side for places like PJ Media, the Daily Caller, bearingarms.com, some of those places. And I call it a bias trigger. And it's the way that they frame things that says exactly the opposite of what's really going on. It's little stuff. But sometimes they're just blatant. I mean, they're just blatant. I've read a few stories on it, and I've watched some of the coverage, and I'm just sitting here looking at this thing going, the prosecutor's an idiot. I mean, my wife's been paying more attention to it than I have, but in the opening arguments, he opens the door for bringing in the felony records, including the child molestation of the two victims. And it's like, but the media is just ignoring all that.
Right.
You know, right. And I understand the argument that, okay, so maybe the criminal record isn't necessarily relevant, except that the first guy that was shot, you know, was screaming obscenities at people and trying to get them to shoot him.
Yeah.
And he was just out of the hospital for mental issues. So yeah, that becomes relevant at that point. And it comes down to a narrative. They decided that this kid was, you know, he's 18 years old. He was 17 when this happened. Should he have been armed there? Okay, that's arguable. It maybe wasn't the smartest move he ever made.
Right.
But he was being chased.
Yeah, and it's a secondary charge. You know, I mean, this is like, oh, and by the way, we're going to do this. It's like sort of the catch-all charge, right? We're talking about murder,
and there's simply no evidence for it,
right? And then manslaughter, and this seems to happen quite a bit with these more socially charged issues. You know, like this overall belief, which is pushed by the news about unarmed black men being shot, and like, okay, well. I mean, over and over again, that's proven false. You know, any one of these cases, when you actually read into what's reported from the witnesses and everything else, it's just simply not accurate, right?
No, it's not, and it's worse than that. It's intentional. I mean, it has to be. There are two rules that I always taught my young journalists when they come to work for me. Pat's rules number one, Pat's rules number two. They got tired of hearing them, but they were important. And it is, number one, everything is always more complicated. Yes, even that. And rule number two, everyone always has an agenda.
And those are important rules to remember. And that's what it comes down to in this. And then, as a friend of mine always used to say, always ask the next question. And the media never asks the next question. And the next question comes down to, okay, in the case of these, it's these unarmed black men. It always comes down to, okay, but then the next question is, at what rate correlated with population are white men shot? And it turns out to be about the same. And if you dig a little deeper, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but if you dig a little deeper, what you find out is it's not really correlated with race. Unarmed people getting shot resisting the police really correlates with economic class. Poor folks tend to commit more crimes of whatever color. They tend to have more negative interactions with the cops, and then they tend to get shot.
Isn't the journalist's job to deliver the truth, even if it's uncomfortable for them? I mean, one of the things, because I was focused on sports journalism, right? And one of the things is one, you don't cheer in the press box, which, every time I get in a press box, I make sure I do, just to make people upset.
Well, and it's hard not to. I mean, I've done sport. I mean, I've done a little bit.
A game is exciting. You guys don't. Yeah.
And if you cover one team all season, you end up being a little bit of a homer, and
But you are supposed to try to not be too much of a homer. The color guy can be a homer, but the actual, the play-by-play guy's supposed to not be. The sports guy's just supposed to deliver the sports. So-and-so beat so-and-so, this and that. Here's a highlight. But we've gotten so far from that you have to watch different. This is insane to me. You have to watch different versions of the news to have an idea of what's going on. And one of the things, and this is in no way defense of anybody, like any kind of political or anything, but they would say such and such was said at the White House today. So I'd go watch the actual unedited White House briefing from Kayleigh McEnany, and I'd be like, that is not at all what was said. Could you take it that way? Okay, yeah, but not really. I mean, you would have to it's just ridiculous, right? Like this desire to alter the truth and then support it, Patrick, support it with tweets.
Right. Yeah. And look, I was not a fan personally. I didn't like him personally of Mean Tweet Guy.
Yeah.
But his policies, if you really dug into his policies, was actually pretty solid on the policy front.
Yeah.
But I would tell, I had a very liberal reporter working for me, and I love her to death, and she still calls me boss, and it's great. But she would come in with this latest outrage from Orange Man. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, but that's not what he actually said.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, and I would get especially for the first couple of years, I got very frustrated with my colleagues and with others going, look, there's plenty you can bash Trump about. Would you please quit making me have to defend the guy because you're taking him out of context?
Right.
Or you're using half of what he said.
Right.
Look, anybody who's been in the business knows how you bias a story. It's not hard.
Sure.
It's in what quotes you use, it's in how you use them, it's in the transition you use to get to the quote, and it's where you place it. It's all easy to do. It's just that you're not supposed to. I always, my reporters would come in and they'd have this, and I'd say, okay, so who said this? They'd have something that was a little editorialized. Okay, so who said it? Well, but no. You're saying it. Your source didn't say it. Yes, it's a logical conjecture, but they didn't say it.
Right.
We don't say things. Our sources say things, and we report it. That's our job. I saw an article. Oh my lands! It just drove me nuts because it was like, our job is to lend context, and not all sides are valid. We got to get past this. We report all sides because sometimes what the other side is saying isn't valid. What?
Yeah.
You don't get to make that determination.
Right.
You don't get to decide what the valid argument is and what it isn't. Now, are there exceptions to that? Yes, there are, and everything. The thing about journalism and journalistic ethics is there are gray areas all over the place.
Sure.
And judgment calls that have to be made. And, deciding what story to run. I had a lady call me up one time and jumped up and down on top of me because I didn't run a story that she thought ought to run. And you get this all the time. I'm community news. I was small paper guy because that's where the fun was. And, who decides who, and I'm the managing editor. Who decides what's news and what isn't? You? Yes. That's sort of what they pay me for.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that, there are exceptions. Look, is the opinion on race of an avowed neo-Nazi something that is valid and that you need to give time to? Well, it depends. What's the story about? Normally speaking, no. I don't really care what the avowed neo-Nazi's opinion is of the Derek Chauvin trial. I know what his opinion is going to be. I have my own. Right. But that's, look, all he's going to do is say something inflammatory it's not really relevant. But at the same time, if I'm doing a story on neo-Nazis, then his opinion's probably valid. And so is the guy that says he's an idiot, who's probably right. But again, I don't get to make the determination on who's right and who isn't.
One of the things, because I've got a media outlet, and I don't want to act like I'm like a big hard news outlet, but there is some hard news aspects of what I do. Everybody likes to be an investigative reporter from time to time. And so I love saying I went down to Del Rio, Texas, because our vice president wouldn't, and that was part of her job. And so I went down there and I found out a lot more because by just being there. And then the judge who I talked to had tipped to our friend Josh, who recommended that I talk to him. His response was interesting. He's like, I'm a Democrat and I'm elected. It's 80,000 people in this county and we are the front door for America. Right. And he's like, and I can't control that because social media makes that happen, outside of my control around the world in different languages that you come to Del Rio to the bridge. And this is how you get in. And so when federal policy changes above me, which I have no control over, I'm left holding the bag and they don't have to provision any of these changes. So I've got this mass of humanity. Some of them have tuberculosis, dozens and dozens and dozens of countries, the origins. There's a terrorist threat that is real. And by the way, and this is him saying, I'm a Democrat. I want a lot of people to come in. I'm pro-immigration. And heck, so is Pete, right? But however, Donald Trump had the better policy. He's like, if Mexico is going to let people walk right through their country, that's their problem, not ours. Don't make it ours. And Donald Trump's policy is saying, hey, Mexico, you have to deal with this. He said, from his point of view, was a better policy. So we can't even report that, though, right? Because you can't give Donald Trump any win at all. And look, Donald Trump's an ass, and I hope he's never president again. Okay, you have to say these things, otherwise the entire conversation gets derailed. Right. But you never saw a story like that. You see the woe and the fear and the guy with the horse and the reins. I mean, one picture, Patrick, right? Oh yeah, and it told the wrong story. Like it's not even accurate. It's a complex place. That is. It's a single node in an Euler diagram of complexity. So there's all these different interdependent systems that are all working, and it's a mess. And to just come back with a picture and to say racism is, as frankly, that's not quality work. That's not professional work. That's just sensationalism.
Well, it's not even just. I mean, it's just hackery. I mean, it's just pure partisanship. Is
it partisanship or is it profiteering on partisanship?
That's a valid question because of course we have the CNN story, where the stories about CNN talking about, well, Donald Trump's the best thing that ever happened to us.
Right.
But and clearly he was, because the ratings are now, practically non-existent, without mean tweets on a daily basis. But it's really, I wrote a column about this once. It really comes down to, people think there's, when people talk about the mainstream media, air quotes, I hate those, but I do them all the time. It's ridiculous. But they talk about the mainstream media and, the media this, the media that, the media the other thing. And they act like there's this big conspiracy among journalists to bias everything the same way. And it really isn't. There really isn't one. It really comes down to most of these people went to the same schools, particularly at the national level. You got like 3 or 4 J schools all of these guys went to, if they went to J school, because some of them, I mean, the talking heads, a lot of them are like theater majors, right?
Right.
They couldn't get it. They were lousy actors and couldn't get a job in Hollywood, so they became newscasters. I mean, and that's true story. I mean, that stuff happened. Especially at the local level. I've known several of them. It's like, yeah, you're a hack, go away. But it's that they live in this massive echo chamber. And so they don't, everybody around them either is a liberal or parrots the liberal line, because unless you're at a small community paper like I was, if you're at a metro or up in the broadcast world, you admit you're a conservative or a libertarian, you're not going to work again.
Right.
And so they got wives and kids and husbands and food, and they got the food on the table. So you shut your mouth and you do what you got to do. I fortunately, well, number one, I never could have, and fortunately had the luxury I didn't have to. But it really isn't. It's a complex, like you say, it's a complex issue. The media bias is a very complex issue. At the levels of, I can't think of his name right now, but the guy that runs CNN. Yes, it's profiteering on sensationalism. It absolutely is. That's his job, right? His job is to turn a profit for CNN. That's what he does. And so, he will whore himself out for whatever position, and he will whore his organization out for whatever position will make them money. But at the level of the reporters, it really is an ideological bias. It really is, for a lot of them, or up levels of them, and that's also very common. You'll get the reporter who just wants to do his job and wants to do it fairly and correctly, but his editor's got a position. But a lot of times these guys, it's not that they're trying to bias it, it's just that they don't think about it. Their biases, they talk about systemic racism, ingrained racism, whatever. It's the same thing. Their biases are so ingrained, so instinctive, so knee-jerk, and they have been so reinforced by the lousy J schools who don't know how to teach anymore, that it's reflexive. It doesn't even occur to them there might be another position, or that the other position might have a valid point.
Is there someone who holds down the tent pole in the media tent that is, by the way, it's also, and I'm going to be hard on the left here, big oil, big pharma, big ag media. They don't, big media. They don't chastise it because it goes their way, right?
Right.
And whenever I hear that big, I go, aha. We always talk about dog whistles, right? Well, there's a dog whistle right there. Like you're already spinning something. There's no need to say that. What's in between? What's medium? What's small energy? Like what are those things? We're going to talk about that because it's not categorized that way. It's meant to trigger someone into a response. And frankly, it like I said, it's hacky. So who can legit, and let's acknowledge that Fox News is pretty damn ridiculous too, but who can actually hold down a credible? It's not 60 Minutes because they're horrible. I mean, look, they corrupted themselves for me back in the 90s when they started changing stories based upon ad revenue, and they killed legitimate good 60 Minutes news stories because of outside interest. And I was like, well, there goes that institution. They'll never have my trust again, and they've earned that contempt.
Yeah, and they tried to kill the story about Laura Logan being nearly gang raped. And I'm not sure that she wasn't. She's never really specified everything that happened, and I've seen photos. I'm not convinced she wasn't gang raped, but they just did. They whitewashed it. They just glided over it. Is there anybody that's holding down the tent pole of good journalism? I'm going to surprise you. In a lot of ways, the WAPO. They've got their biases and they're there, but and I probably disagree with Marty Barron, who is the executive editor, on pretty much everything. That said, I have the deepest respect for him. The man has balls of absolute cast iron. This is the guy that, if you've seen, the name of the movie's escaped me, but it was about the pre-scandal in Philadelphia. Or Boston. This is the guy that goes into a very, very, very Catholic town, takes over the newspaper, and then takes on the Catholic Church as a Jew, as a brand new editor. That is a spine of absolute steel. And so the WAPO does a pretty good job. And they have a very diverse, ideologically diverse editorial page that long ago took over from the New York Times as the single best editorial page in the country.
Okay.
So, I give them a lot of credit. They're not always what I'd want them to be. And I will actually give Fox News some credit too. They have some of their programming is very good. Brett Baer is a man for whom I have deep respect. And their general just print reporting is pretty good. Is pretty solid. Now, a lot of their opinion programming is, come on, it just is what it is. Although the 5 is hilarious, and we all know that. But
that's put forward as comedy, though, right?
It's a talk show. It's a talk show. Gutfeld's going to be sarcastic. Waters is going to get his head handed to him. I mean, it just is what it is. The LA Times is another one that does a pretty good job, all told.
Right.
Now, there's a common thread in both of those. They're individually owned. They got sold. They're not owned by a hedge fund. Most newspapers, 80 to 85% of newspapers in this country, even your local weekly, are owned by one hedge fund or another at ultimate remove, which is why they're not able to do their jobs. I mean, they're just, when I got let go by Gannett, what is now Gannett was the Time Gatehouse, I had 8 newspapers under me, 2 of which had no staff. We were producing them from other newsrooms. I had 3 FTE in my office, not counting me, at a 5-day. And for a while, it was a 6-day. What do you do? When you got 3 guys holding down a job that needs 8, there's only so much you can do. And that's part of the problem, and that's part of what happens. But Jeff Bezos bought the WAPO, and I can't think of his name, Chen, I think, bought the LA Times.
That's right.
Both of these men are billionaires. Both of them invested heavily in restoring their newsrooms, hiring new journalists, updating technology, anything that the editor said, I need this to do the job right. These men wrote a check.
Yeah.
And then said, I'm out. I am exercising no editorial control. You guys do your job. And it's notable that the WAPO is not shy about criticizing their owner. They will go after Bezos when they think he needs to be gone after. And that's the other thing, is that they are owned by these men who say, profits are second, do the job. The profits will come. So if we lose money for a couple of years, I can afford it. It's pocket change. Let's lose money for a couple of years and do the job right. That is huge. Hedge funds, these major corporate hedge funds, they want money. They want a return on their investment, and it's a vicious cycle. Because the bean counters, who've never spent a day in the trenches at a community paper, see newsroom personnel as non-revenue producing. And so when they gotta make the profit margin, we're the first ones to get cut. And it turns into a really nasty cycle, because ad revenue is not subscriptions, ad revenue is what supports your local paper. And the ad reps have to have something to sell. And what happens is, one of my specialties was rescuing newsrooms. So, they'd send me into a troubled newsroom to repair the product, the news product. So in I'd go, and the first thing I do is look, what's our coverage area? Okay, so I took over the Miami News Record, Miami, Oklahoma, spelled Miami, but it's Miami. They're serious about that. And I walk in, and there's the 40-year veteran sports guy, my associate editor, me, one reporter, and a newsroom clerk. And we are covering the entire county, including towns of, a couple hundred people. And I said, nope, can't do it. Can't do it. Got to pull our horns in. It's too much. We're going to have to cut these little towns. If somebody wants to send us something, we'll run it. If something big happens, we'll go cover it, but we're not covering their fall festival. We're not, we can't cover their city council meetings. We just can't. Okay, fine. Well, the ad reps go out to sell. I'm not covering my town. I'm not buying anything. What good does it do me? And so revenue goes down. Another round of cuts. You lose a couple more people. You got to pull your horns in a little more. And it's just this vicious cycle. And it's what's happened to these newspapers all across the country until they have to be closed. All because, and not that profits are bad. Look, I'm a capitalist. You want to make money. But the hedge funds that control the corporates don't understand that it's not all about money in journalism. It can't be if we're doing our jobs. And for those of us at the community level, I mean, the guys up at the major metros, they make pretty good money. The broadcast networks at the higher levels, they make pretty good money. New York Times reporters started probably more than I made, after 30 years and 10 years as an editor. At my level, the level I worked, I was hiring guys with master's degrees for $12 an hour. You don't spend 6 to 8 years in school getting a master's degree and willingly going to work for $12 to $13 an hour if it's not a calling.
Right.
You're not doing it because you're going to make money at it. You're doing it because you can't not. And the corporate guys just don't understand that and never have.
When you talk about these folks that are holding down journalistic integrity, we're still talking about folks with these fancy J school degrees. I mean, it's fair to say that WAPO has its share of left-leaning ideologues.
Sure.
And then are there right-leaning ideologues? Like, do they meter that out and they're like, let's go hire some folks that are going to cover the other side of this and send them on a tag team to go cover the same story? I mean, how do you, as an editor, how do you do that? And does WAPO do that okay?
Well, number one, I don't think that they do that. And I certainly never did. But then again, I never asked my reporters about their politics when I hired them.
Right.
That wasn't relevant to me.
Because it's expected that those things don't make it into the room, right?
Well, I mean, they're going to get in. Look, newsrooms are an interesting place. If you've ever been in a real newsroom, it's a rougher place than a mining camp. The language is salty, to say the least. Drill instructors might blush at some, and the jokes are really rough. And some of that's just, it's like anything else where the job is stressful and you see a lot of crap that you shouldn't. Military, fire, police. Journalists actually have quite a bit in common with all of those professions. We see the worst of humanity. We see a lot of things that no one should have to. And you develop a very thick skin and a very dark sense of humor as a defense mechanism. You make jokes at murder scenes. You're eating a sandwich while editing pictures of horrible stuff. It's just what you do. But you don't. I never asked about it. Now, I did warn them what mine were. Because, look, if you can't handle working for a conservative, I don't want you.
Right.
But I never asked what their politics were before I hired them. And I only made it clear that, your politics will stay out of your reporting in so much as possible. Now, heresy here. Journalistic objectivity is a myth, and it is impossible.
Okay.
No one can be wholly objective. You just can't. Everybody brings their biases to anything that they do. What you can do is be fair. And that's what I always insisted on, was be fair. Try to look at the other side. Try to make a point of stepping outside of yourself. It drives my wife nuts because I will even though I don't agree with the other side's argument, I'll make it. I will make their argument in fairness. She gets really frustrated with that phrase too, because in fairness, is a phrase I use a lot. But it's because I have to. It's reflect after 30 years. It's reflexive. Yeah, you're if you've done the job right, looking at the other side and trying to see where their point might be is reflexive, but it should be. I always made my reporters write a weekly column. A lot of them didn't like it. They didn't want to have to write an opinion column. I never told them what they could or couldn't write about. I killed maybe 2 columns in all my career, just because they were just over the top. If you do the opinion column, you're right. Your readers, and this is all, look, it's different at the national level. This is all the local level, but the local level is where the action really is, and the local level is where it's most important. What happens in DC? Yes, it affects your life, but not as directly as corruption at the city council. Not as directly as a county commissioner getting bribed or stupid crap at the school board. That's the stuff that affects you most directly. And that's the stuff you need to know about way more than the latest idiocy coming out of the Beltway. The column lets your readers know what your biases are. And then they can evaluate your coverage based on that. And they have that right. The modern journalism, and I hate using the word journalism with so much of it, it treats the readers, the viewers, as if they are morons. They're not. Some of them are. But treat your readers like they're intelligent human beings capable of understanding what you're writing and making their own decisions, because they are. It's the rule by experts. Well, if you're not an expert in X, Y, or Z, you don't have a right to have an opinion. No, I'm not an expert in X, Y, or Z, and I don't have a J school degree. I don't have any degree at all. I just worked my way up like it used to be done when it was a blue collar profession. But I am a smart man. I am capable of looking at dumbed down, and it is dumbed down, and that's what it is, and that's fine. The layman level stuff of whether it's COVID or racial stuff or whatever, and saying, okay, so what are the real world implications of this? What are the secondary and tertiary effects, which politicians and most journalists are really bad about looking at?
Oh boy, yeah.
And forming logical conclusions from that and making my own flipping decisions. And that's what we should be doing as journalists, is presenting the facts and letting our readers decide what the context is, what the ultimate facts of the case are. And that we've lost sight of that, and it frustrates me knowing.
Has the ship sailed on quality journalism? I mean, when you say hedge funds, I mean, they're the bane of our existence. I really believe this too. Like, I'm a capitalist. I think that is the ultimate the answer. But at some point, we do need the government to come in and smack some people back and be like, you can't own everything. I mean, because they only consider, look, I'm being unfair now. They only consider profit, right? But it sure does look like there's a whole lot of singular focus. I mean, Dan Rather just wrote a piece. I don't know if you read his Substack. And he talks about parents having control over what their kids are taught in school. And he sort of rejects that. He absolutely rejects that. And he takes the tack that parents are racists and they're monsters and everything else. And look, some of that is true. But the moment a parent wants to be involved in their child's education, the school is subordinate to that. And Dan Rather's wrong. I just said Dan Rather's wrong, but Dan Rather's wrong. I mean,
Dan Rather's been wrong for a long time.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the thing, right? Here's this icon or former icon who's writing this stuff that is. Look, if you've lived your whole life in New York or DC, you haven't got the first clue. Get this. You're going to love this, Patrick. You haven't got the first clue what's going on in Dodge City, Kansas.
Nope. You don't.
And
Dodge is an interesting town.
Yeah. You can't decide how folks in Dodge City or in Salt Lake City are going to live because you can't comprehend their reality, whether you're a journalist or you're a politician. I recall when the big storm came through Texas last year, people were freezing David Muir, here's this highly respected guy. I lost a lot of respect for him because he spun this story as like, here come the meat lockers, the mobile meat lockers to store all the bodies. Like, this is a storm that's going to come in. And was it bad? Okay, yes, it was bad, right? But this isn't a thing where hundreds and hundreds or thousands and thousands of people died. Emergency response responds because we're a pretty advanced country with these things. And so instead of saying that, like, they're prepping, they're getting ready, we're not sure how bad this will be, but, the government is responding in a way that makes sense instead of like, here come the refrigerator trucks to hold the bodies that will be there. It's like, what are you doing? I can't take that seriously, Patrick. And here's a guy who does a pretty good job overall. Now he goes somewhere and he's going to show up. He's going to fly into Afghanistan and wear his chinos and have his great muscles and stuff. And like, hey, dude, I'll run circles around you because you don't know what you're talking about, right? Get an actual expert. You go stay in the studio. It's laughable.
Yeah, and that is one of the big mistakes that we make as journalists. And I learned the lesson really early. When I was in college, and I did go to college, I just didn't finish it. But I was at Dodge City Community College. And, I'm in school 2 weeks, and I've already figured out that I just love this. I mean, this stuff is it's just too much fun. And I wanted to be a photographer, but, I was, even in 92, I went, let's just learn every job in the newsroom to be on the safe side. And so, but I go down to the Dodge City Daily Globe within 2 weeks, and I said, you got any work? And they said, yeah. Here's what we got. We need people to come in on Friday nights during football season and Tuesday and Friday nights during basketball season. And nobody does this anymore. It's sad. Take calls from the coaches. You're going to get the box score and a couple of quotes from the coach. My favorite of all time was the Hanston, Kansas football 8-man football coach. They just annihilated they were really good. Just annihilated the opposing team like 45-0. It was insane. And I said, coach, anything you want to say? And he said, and he apparently was not happy with the way that his team had played. And he says, yeah, looked like we got caught kissing our sister out there.
Ah.
He's like, you're not going to run that, are you? Yes, I am. And so I did that. And then they needed a photographer. So I did that. And then, that first summer, Dodge City at the time had a pretty good little long 3/8 dirt track right in the middle of town. Dirt auto racing. And so I go to the sports editor, Brian, and I said, Brian, is anybody covering the races? Are we not going to cover the races? He said, I haven't got anybody. You want to do it? Sure. I don't even like dirt track racing.
Right.
I wasn't an auto racing fan, but you're offering me a beat? Yeah, I'm there. So, but I had some friends that were racers. And car guys. And so, I of course got my pit pass. And the first thing I did, and this goes to your not knowing what you're talking about, is knowing the totality of my ignorance. I walked into the pits, went to a friend and said, who do I need to talk to around here that's friendly and will help me understand what I'm looking at? And he points me at somebody. And so I walked over and I said, stuck my hand out, said, hi, I'm Patrick Richardson. I'm with the Dodge City Daily Globe. I'm here to cover this race, and I know pretty much nothing. That's the track. This is the car. The car goes on the track. That's all I know. Educate me.
Right.
And his eyes light up. His smile gets real big. And, he's excited because racers love racing. And they love talking about their cars, and they love talking about racing. And so he proceeds to give me a crash course in the 30 minutes before the race starts on what I'm looking at. And I've got some of the, I know what the checkered flag is. I know the way, I know some of that stuff. But he's giving me the some of the intricacies of this. I ended up being a racing fan. I ended up learning to just really love dirt track racing because it was a lot of fun. I haven't followed it in years, but it was Saturday nights down at the racetrack, getting paid to go watch some racing, ended up being a highlight. And journalists, and I use that story training young journalists all the time. Look, if you don't, we had a drag strip over by the Pittsburgh Morning Sun, my last newspaper. just over the border in Missouri, and there's some really good racing going on. And my sports editor just didn't want to do it because he didn't know anything about it. I said, look, just go down, find somebody. Don't even ask. Just find somebody in the pits. Tell him what you're there for. Tell him, I know nothing. Please tell me what I need to know. And you won't be able to shut him up.
Right. Yeah.
And journalists, that's a lesson that stuck with me through 30 years. When you don't know something, admit it and ask someone who does.
I want to add this is the spy element of that, because I do the same thing when I'm deployed. I never know enough about something. So you go to somewhere where they're into whatever, and we found this village, and like, what do you guys do in your spare time? I mean, I don't understand. Like, how do you survive out here? And they're like, one of the things we do is the boys wrestle. Like, everything stops right there. Okay, I need to know about this. To include like a demonstration of this wrestling. And it's kind of like a judo sumo kind of wrestling where you're trying to get control of the other guy and get him out of a ring, right? But no one had known about this. And it was simply because I was curious about who they were. And then everybody in every village, I could now get them to show me, like, do you guys have that wrestling thing here? And even though I might know that they did, I still wanted them to be excited about it and tell me about their place. And so even if you know about something, just ask them so you can be enlightened by what they know. And I think this is one of the problems with J school degrees is that you're not allowed to be curious. You're not allowed to not know something. Even if you think you know it, I promise
you don't know it all.
Asking questions like an actual reporter or a spy, in my case, because my job is part reporter, right? You will be amazed at what you can learn, and even more amazed by how desperate they are to tell you everything they know about that topic and other topics as well.
Exactly. I'll tell you two little stories. One is one of the places that I actually kind of learned that before I became a journalist is I'm a big fan of the late, great Dr. Jerry Purnell's work, science fiction. And Dr. Purnell's his seminal stuff is John Christian Falkenberg stories about this mercenary commander, John Christian Falkenberg. And whenever Falkenberg was asking for a briefing from someone that he wasn't one of his officers, what do you know about this? Assume nothing. And I've used that very line when someone says to me, well, okay, so before we start, what do you know about XYZ? Assume nothing. Tell me everything. Because I may think I know, but I may not. And regardless, people are going to be more expert than I am. My false modesty aside, look, my knowledge base is very broad because I am a curious human being, and because 30 years of journalism, you cover a lot of stuff. And so you got to learn about it. But when you're sitting down with someone, don't assume that you know. Let them tell you.
Yeah.
The other thing is I love the concurrence. I always have the concurrence or the intersection, if you like, between journalism and a lot of other professions. A good friend of mine, and I won't name names, but that I met through other science fiction fans, was a journalist and was a journalist in the Army, and eventually ended up as an intelligence analyst for the financial department. Name's escaping me for some reason in Washington, D.C. and now works for an independent intelligence firm, but was actually on the National Counterterrorism Center in New Vindman, was very, very good at her job. She was a journalist. It's a journalist. It's that simple. Journalism is a profession that, if you take it seriously, if you do it right, lends itself to many things, and it in the skill set intersects with so much. Because you're doing the same thing. I mean, you talk about an intelligence agent. You're doing the same thing I did every day. You're walking in, you're talking to people, you're getting stuff, you're answering questions, and then trying to figure out what it all means.
Right.
It's the same job.
It is. And you also don't know where the story is sometimes. My beat is outside the camp, right?
Right.
And that can be your beat in Dodge City or any place. Like, what can I go learn today?
Yeah. I used to. Times have changed, and these days, you do a lot via email and over the phone. But in the early days, my editors would come out and find me sitting at my desk and kick me out of the newsroom.
Right.
The news. Are you writing a story? Nope. Are you making phone calls? Nope. Get out. Go find something.
Yeah.
I was at the Parsons Sun about 20 years ago. It was a little itty-bitty town in southeast Kansas.
How big a town is Dodge City, by the way?
It's about 30,000 these days.
Okay. So you guys can support a small paper.
Yeah, they can. I don't live there anymore, but yeah, they can. Unfortunately, it's owned by Gannett. There's like one person there.
Right.
Which is really, or maybe two. I think there's an editor and one other person. No, it's not. No, when you consider that it's a town that's 57% Hispanic, has a large Vietnamese population, also has a large West African population.
Oh my gosh! Come on, knock it off. How are you going to do all that?
Yeah. Well, number one, you absolutely should have a Spanish language paper.
Right.
I mean, okay, so yes, we speak English in this country, and I agree with that. And if you're going to come here, you should learn to speak English. I agree with all of that. But you have a town that is 57% Hispanic. Probably 60% of those people speak broken or no English and probably do not read it.
Yeah.
You need a Spanish language edition. And you need reporters that speak Spanish. I would love to go back and work in my hometown. I never will because I don't speak Spanish.
Right.
And
right.
the editor there should not be monolingual. It just shouldn't.
And also, who's going to sell the subscriptions? I mean, you've got to go out and knock on doors in a town that size because you can actually ask people and be like, "Hey, I'm going to be telling our news. Can I count on you for whatever $1 a month, or whatever it is?" And nobody's going to make any money. But damn, someone's got to go out and sell those things.
Well, and if I can give a shameless plug, I'm working on a project. It's not ready to launch yet. I'm just getting it started. I'm calling it prichardjournalism.com. And the reason for it is there are, and you'll see Newseum and Reuters and some of the Pointer talk about news deserts. Very, very few communities these days proportionally have a newspaper. The weeklies have shuttered. You're seeing some of that come back. We talked about the hedge funds, the big hedge funds, Gannett. They're not technically a hedge fund, but that's who owns them.
Right.
Fortress Investments, if I remember correctly. They are selling off papers. They've sold 2022 at last count, divesting. And they're selling them to small family-owned groups or individuals or just small local groups back into local ownership. And that is happening. And that is the future. And that's a good thing. The future is the past. That's the way it used to be. And I have seen some startups. There's been a couple of startups in Kansas that have done very well, but they're rare.
Yeah.
But so what we need is community journalists. We need citizen journalists. We need people to go out and live stream the school board meeting.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody holding these local politicians to account. Unfortunately, most of these people don't have any training. Worse yet, most of the people trying don't know what their rights are. And so I'm hoping to get together a website and some video training videos and this sort of thing, resources for the citizen journalists to learn how to do the job, learn why ethics matter, learn what the law is. That's kind of the part I'm working on right now, is gathering up the open meetings and records laws from all 50 states. So that, and the territories, so that they understand that no, the school board cannot kick you out for live streaming. You have the right to do it. Here are the things that you can request in an open records request, and they have to give them to you. One of the problems, the Kansas Open Records Act has very little in the way of teeth. The Kansas Open Meetings Act is worse. But by statute, in Kansas, as an example, there is no exemption for reasonable costs and for the media. We still have to pay it. But there is, in statute, rules on what they can charge. And it is reasonable copying fees defined in statute as 25 cents a page. Staff time, they may charge you for the salary of the lowest paid, the hourly salary of the lowest paid employee who is capable of performing the search, finding you the records. And if you request them electronically, they may not charge you for page count. And of course, who doesn't want them? I don't want hard copies. I want electronic copies because then I can OCR the thing and I can cut and paste and I can search it all that, so I don't have to read it all. I can find the stuff I'm looking for because they will deluge you. They'll give you go away prices. They'll interpret the request as broadly as possible, and then what charge you. Like in one case I've had recently, charge you $6,000. But they will also try to charge you 35 cents a page or 50 cents a page or any of this. And if you don't know that they aren't allowed to do that, and don't know that you can make a complaint to the AG or the county attorney, which is the prosecutor in Kansas, they'll do it, and people will pay it, or they'll go away. They won't try to narrow their records requests.
Hey, let me ask you this, because the minutia is cool, but it's making me think about, again, how similar our jobs are, right? And I always knew that my job was like a reporter, but the skills, like there wasn't a reporter there to teach me how to do it better. If you're going to run a small town paper or you're going to work at one, who are the must-have relationships that you need to have? I would imagine the AG for the county, or whatever they're calling that DA person. That's someone you got to know. You got to know a couple of judges. Who do you need to have? Like, how many people is it, do you think, that you need to, like, I need to have let's go to dinner and talk, off the record kind of relationship?
All of them. Everybody. No, seriously, everybody. Everybody in that county.
The same for me.
Should be willing to do that. You should have enough of a reputation.
Yeah.
When I ran the little paper here in the town I live in, my reputation was, excuse me, my language, but he's an asshole, but he's honest.
Yeah. Right.
I wasn't well liked, but that wasn't my job. I was the editor.
Right.
I wasn't there to be liked. But he's honest, and I liked that.
Yeah.
At bare minimum, look, you need to have a good relationship, if possible, and it isn't always possible, with the sheriff, with the police chiefs, or somebody in their office.
Right.
One of the things I did at Parsons was the Parsons police chief hated my guts. But his officers didn't, because I got along well with the sheriff, but his officers liked me a lot, and they liked me because I was working cops and courts. That was my beat. And I would get my stories out for the morning and then walk across the street to the courthouse and spend the rest of the day BSing with people in the courthouse, sitting in the room where the cops hung out. I got pulled over doing 85 and a 55, and the highway patrolman walks over and goes, "Oh, it's you. Just slow down."
Would you slow down, please? Yeah.
Yeah, because they knew me. I was that. Even the ones that didn't know my name. Oh, you're the reporter guy. So the county attorney, if possible, or someone in his office, the city clerk, the county clerk. Obviously the named people. But what you really need to do is find the people that are the ones that really run things. And it isn't, as you know well, it isn't always the people with the title.
Right.
And cultivate good relationships with that. Show up at the fire department or the police department with cliche, yes, but they like them donuts. Just show up with donuts and say, "Hey guys, how you doing?"
Yeah.
Make friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Yellow Pages is your friend, even today.
The what?
Yeah. Yeah. One of my reporters was having trouble finding the source. I pulled out the Yellow Pages with, here's 5 people to call. And he's like, huh? Quit Googling. Pull out your phone book.
Yeah.
Go down it.
We only got a couple minutes left here. I want to give you the chance to take the mic and ask me, because our jobs do overlap so much. I thought it might be interesting to play with this for a minute or two here.
Sure. So, I guess, what's your favorite wow moment from being a spy? I mean, the thing that was funny or just surprised you, well, that was different.
There's all kinds of funny things and things where you just look at someone and you're like, did everybody else just hear him say that? Because I'm so paying attention, right? And everybody else is like kind of not paying attention, I would say, for the most part. And, these moments happen where you look and like, this guy, like, and I grab my green notebook and I write that down. Like, I was the boss, I'd want to know this, because a lot of my job, like, we think of spies as being folks that are just focused on threat. And I think you'll appreciate this. The worst way to find out where the bombs are is to come into a room and say, "Where are the bombs?"
Yeah.
If
so you murder that guy.
Right.
Oh.
If I never, ever ask for that, they'll know that I'm a guy that gathers information. And so I never gathered, not never. I forced myself to not ever ask questions based on threat, because everybody else in the military is doing that already. It's not just the spies like me, right? Is the commander winning here, or are they losing? I'm just doing a tabulation sheet. Here's where you're losing. And then they start rubbing their face like, oh my God, what the hell? And so it's these moments where you're like, that is the military right there losing. And there's certain hallmarks that I picked up. If someone said to the host nation person we were talking to, yes, but my commander wants to do this. Like, I know the commander above that guy. This is not what we want, And so I was able to take these things and illustrate these things. Like, you're coming in and you're driving this person towards something, and you're not even going to be here in 2 days. What are you doing? Shut up. What does this guy want to do? And so the big revelation I'm going to tell you about is just, I got one of the governors to give me his plan, which sounds crazy that we would actually ask the governor their plan, but we got the governor's plan. And that plan was very detailed. And I brought that back like a reporter to the Army. And the ones that got it. And they're like, oh my God, these guys are way more capable than we're giving them credit for. And they don't need that much of our help. If we can do less and accomplish our goals more, this is worth putting not so much effort into to see how we do. And so it was those kind of things where you're like, wow, this is an area with just so much potential for growth.
Yeah, well, yeah. And from what I've seen from the outside, we've lost. It seems like the intelligence community in general has just lost track of plans and intentions. Yeah. And you don't get those by saying, what are your plans and intentions?
Right.
You got to go out and just, you got to learn, get in the head, which is what you need to do as a journalist too. When you're interviewing somebody, you just got to get in their head.
We grabbed that governor, and so the Army was briefing about this stupid bazaar. And one day a general even came down like, we're going to rebuild this bazaar. This is 2012. Like, we've been there for a long time. It's just an old mud ruin, right? It could be fixed up in a minute. You see some cold water and some dirt and some labor, and you can rebuild anything there. But it wasn't rebuilt because it wasn't allowed to be, because the Taliban controlled that, right? And so this general thinks they were going to solve it with money. Meanwhile, I wait a couple of days for that to kind of wear off, and I grab the governor and I'm like, tell me about this bazaar. Can we go walk and just show me what you see in your mind's eye? And I saw something incredible, and from their point of view, I was able to tell this story. This is what's going to be here. This is what's going to be there. No one had ever done this. We just showed this ruin and said, we're going to continue to put money into this until we can make it work. And we weren't putting money. And one of the main questions the commander asked me, Patrick, was, tell me why these guys aren't taking our aid. What's going on there? And that was like, this is a way to show them, like, you guys brief this muddy ruin that you can't seem to kickstart. Well, why won't they take the money that we have? Everybody knows it. We've told them all about it. What's going on? And those are the big moments where you realize, like, I'm doing something that literally nobody else can do right now.
Yeah. Why aren't they taking our money? Well, did you ask them what they want?
Yeah.
You're going to rebuild their bazaar. Did you ask them what they wanted in their bazaar? No.
And you know what happens if you take that money? I learned this. The Taliban will be like, hey, you took some money from the Americans, and we oftentimes will pick what business they get to run, and it's like, they don't want to do that. So you ask the governor, like, what should be here? Well, right here's the cab stand. Over here's the hotel. Over here is going to be this other store. Who would run these things? Oh, so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. What about the Taliban? Oh, they won't mind if we handle it in this way. So here I am talking about how to rebuild this bazaar. We've been trying for years to get this thing to go, and it has very little to do with us. If we just shut up, get out of the way, and allow them to lead, they might just lead. Did the bazaar ever get going? No, but we ran out of time. We undermined the governor too much. We couldn't get out of our own way. And again, that's that reporter stuff. Like, here is why this isn't working. That's why, like, when everybody else talks about Afghanistan and how qualified everybody was, and I'm like, bullshit. It's not real. Because on the very basic level, on the ground truth level, there is no hospital there. There are no jobs there. There is no stability here. You're talking about an army that looks around like, we hate it here. We eat crappy food. We're lonely for our families. We don't get paid reliably. I don't trust the person in charge. I don't care how proficient you are with the rifle. The people outside of the camp don't believe that army is proficient. So you have none of this is believed, right?
Right.
And so that's the story of how you do the reporting thing. You're like, don't you see you have all of these police that don't have the authority with the population. So you believe you have a police force. You're briefing yourself that you do, but the reality is that nobody's going to call them.
And I know we're maybe a little over time, but I got a question for you as well, because one of the things that I've studied the Middle East, because for the last 20 years, you just had to. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I think is one of the roots of our failure, is that we just simply refuse. The West, from a very long time, going back to Churchill, has just simply refused to accept, understand, and work with the fact that it's a tribal area.
Yeah.
And work within the tribal structure. You can't, you make up a unit of two tribes that hate each other.
Yeah.
And then you wonder why they're ineffective. Why are we unable? I mean, this is common sense stuff, and it's easy to see if you just do a little reading.
Right.
Why are our commanders so unable to comprehend that simple reality and work within it?
Because the commanders, the first problem with the commanders is that they all don't recognize how influential they are in that region, and their presence, their money, their arms override anything else. And so when they show up to some kind of tribal anything, they've poisoned that meeting. They can't be there. You need a guy like me who sits in the back of the courthouse, who talks to the cop, who's the bailiff, and just go, here's what happened today. And then you just guide it from afar, if you're going to guide at all, or like only apply pressure right here on this one stick. But we don't do that. So when we look at tribe, plenty of commanders know a lot about tribes, but they don't know how to navigate it, because all the military commanders in general are all about application of force. How can I impose my will on this system? I refuse to lose. Like, this is not worth fighting for. This is not worth fighting for. Don't even try to fight for that. Well, then what's left? Well, doing nothing is a lot. And allowing that thing to be what it is, and just let them know, like, I'm going to leave this alone as long as you guys stay chilled out. You guys bring me in, and I'm going to knock heads. And everybody understands that. But if you allow them to figure these things out, like they have a system for moving water, well, then don't build a competing system to move water. Or before you do, talk to the guy who's responsible for moving water. Wait, Pete, there's a guy responsible for moving water around here? Yes. How do you know that? Because there is. Would you like me to meet that guy? I promise you, if you give me a week or two, I'll find that guy. And more importantly, I'll treat him like a VIP, bring him on the camp and give him ice cream, and he'll tell me everything. Plus everything else. Everything.
And face is so important in that region, and we just don't understand it.
Yeah.
And you made a really good point. I mean, it is, the mess with me. It's the Mattis quote. I came in peace.
Yeah.
I didn't bring my artillery. I am begging you with tears in my eyes. Do not F with me. I will kill you all.
Yeah.
I guarantee you those Iraqis respected that.
Well, I'll tell you what. Here's where Mattis is wrong. He should have stayed the fuck out of there. Keep away. Go in your palace. Deploy me. I will go tell you what I see. Because the moment he shows up with that charisma, that personality, all the soldiers so desperate to be the right thing for him when he shows up, nobody is focused on the mission. They're all focused on the man, including the Iraqis.
Yeah, and I can see
and
that.
I would say that to his face, and he would probably say, yeah, you're right. And if he didn't, he'd be wrong.
From what I know of Mattis, he would probably go, yeah, you were right. It was a screw up. He self-reflection has never been a problem of his.
Yeah.
Which is why he's the last effective general I think we've had. So yeah, I mean that's something I've wondered about for a long time, and I haven't had an opportunity to talk to somebody who's really on the ground there, trying to figure out why we just cannot seem to navigate the tribal structure, or are unwilling to.
Understand this: there's no institutional knowledge for that to transfer to the deployable people, right? They'll tell you that it's there, but I promise you it's not. Every unit comes and they're, I would say, prepared at a 15% level. Okay, are they a military maneuver unit that can go do things? Sure, but they don't have the first clue what to do. Take a cub reporter and now make it so that they can't write complete sentences. And now don't give them a nose for the news. And then turn them loose. And you're like, please, stop. Stop. And that's the truth throughout the board. They go through some training, but we don't handle it like we're serious. We handle it like it's easy to do. Oh, we're just going to go talk to people. Are you? Please don't. because you haven't spent any time preparing yourself. Please don't talk like you know about the tribes, because you don't.
Right.
And if you do, to shut the hell up and understand what these guys are at. Because in a tribal society, there's never enough of anything. Even if there is not. And until you can recognize that and work in that paradigm, because that makes it really hard to go provide a unit, like a electrical problem. You can't solve it, because if you electrify this village and then this village, you've already pissed off all of the other villages. Because that tribe got it first. This tribe got it first. They don't like us. And even if you come there and give it to them, it won't be. And then
it's
reality,
an insult because you gave it to them second.
Well, and reality leaves, right? We don't have the same electricity. They pay less for it. They get more of it, whatever it is, right? None of that's rooted in reality. And so it's very hard to navigate that. So you let the people there that already know how to navigate the tribes, you let them do it. How do I empower you? We have so much money for electricity. How do we approach this? Can we get a bunch of other elders in here and figure out how we want to work this so they can handle the messaging? They can see the plan. And then something like that, maybe you can get that win, but only maybe. But we're not trained to do that.
No. And I understand, look, junior officers, a junior officer without aggression is a sorry thing. And they want promotions. They want a good efficiency report. They got to do stuff to get that. Sitting around doing nothing isn't going to get them that. Their colonel is going to be up their butt screaming, "Why aren't things being done?" Because he wants a good efficiency report. I mean, it's the careerism is killing us.
Yeah, well, and then don't let the colonels go either. They're doing the same thing. They don't know what to do. Even if they've deployed, they've never had the job for more than, say, 8 months at a time while deployed, right? And so they go out and they're doing this new job and they don't know. So you need someone like me who's been there. And it's like, whoa, do less. And the ones that get it right away. But it still takes me 3 months to get them to get it. And now you got 3 months left of operations. And then you got 3 months of some operations as they get ready to wind down. And then you got, a new unit. And it's not. So even the senior guys don't get it quick enough because we're ill prepared for the fight.
Yeah, we didn't learn anything from the 1-year deployments in Vietnam. We didn't learn a thing.
Right. Any minute spent in a tank preparing for a deployment are minutes spent losing. You're already investing in losing because there's just no tank-on-tank combat out there. Right. So all of that stuff that you need to do to maintain your tanker unit, sorry, you can't do that. If I'm going to push you too far on the side of capacity to do your job right, I'm fine with that. And you might lose some tanker skills. So what? You're doing your job wrong before you even get there. Anyhow, that's just but it's all of that stuff comes from reporting, right? Like I'm now an investigative reporter telling you why we lost Afghanistan because I saw lesson after lesson, unit after unit, year after year, deployment after deployment. All of these things, these truths just kept being true, whether we accepted them or not.
Well, and the thing is that there's this mystique around investigative reporting, right? And Woodward and Bernstein, who were frankly hack young reporters played by a source.
Right.
But there's this mystique, all the president's men around investigative reporting. All it is asking questions. It's just asking questions. There's no special skill to it. There's no special. Well, I mean, I guess there is. There's asking questions and shutting up.
There's skill, but most of the skill is like holding back what you're desperate to ask and asking the right question, not your question. That takes a skill. That there's like some savvy in that.
Yeah, I mean, but really, in journalism, intelligence gathering, all of it just comes down. Again, there's this mystique around spies. It's all James Bond, and
right.
Soldier, sailor, tanker, spy. Yeah. All that stuff, and spies are always in danger, and mostly not. Not that it doesn't happen, but it's mostly just going around and asking questions.
And it's a dangerous environment, right? And so on the worst day, and then you are particularly a threat. But if you're doing your job well, my mouthpiece is my best weapon, and I'm standing in front of them doing the job in front of their face, whether it's the army or the enemy, and they cannot tell because I'm not doing anything. Like there's an elegance in what I do. It's a sculptive art where I'm just slowly peeling away what doesn't need to be there, right? And then just revealing what's there.
And doing it in the best tradition of an investigative journalist. When I do an interview, I used to have a list of questions, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, you're trained to do that, right? Write down all your questions before you go. Now, I've usually got a sense in my head of what I want to ask. But when I sit down to do an interview, 9 times out of 10, I introduce myself. We little small chit chat, try and find some common ground. Let's be buddies. Okay, so this is what you called us and said this is a problem. Talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Tell me what's going on. And then I shut up.
Yeah.
Maybe, and if something comes up that strikes me, okay, I'll interject. Hey, tell me about this, and maybe agree with them a little bit and tell some stories that are along the same line, or this. Yeah, that frustrates me too.
Same
but
exact.
You just get them talking and shut up.
Shut up. Nod. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
And then what else? And then super simple.
Or you mentioned this. Talk to me about this thing.
Yeah.
Same thing you've done to me through this whole thing.
Tell me more.
The same thing you've done to me through this whole thing. So talk to me a little bit about this.
Yeah.
And shut up and let the guy talk. I mean, it's that simple.